the bio team, probably Jiang. It's regarding the life cycle of bio guidances. Now, it's one question, but there's 3 parts to it. So, again, and let me just ask them all together. So, what triggers them to be published? What causes them to be withdrawn, if not by a citizen's petition? And what is a sponsor to do if there isn't a bio guidance, especially for the locally acting drugs? Who do we talk to? On the withdrawn question, there was a bio guidance that was withdrawn over a year ago. And, again, what is a sponsor to do?
Tough question. So I think right now I think the Office of Research Standard, they're working on develop guidance and posting guidance. So for the Bioequivalence division, we I think it started from last year or so. We are not doing much of the guidance, only guidance revision, little bit. So I guess I'm not sure I can answer your question.
You could probably direct your question to. You can probably direct your question to the Division of Drug Information, and they'll be able to triage your question accordingly to the respective office.
And that is one of the, if you have a question that we're not able to address with who's available to us today, CDER SBIA at fda.hhs.gov. That email address right there is exactly what Julia was just talking about. You can direct your questions there, and we'll try to find the right person to answer for you. All right, let's go to microphone number 1. Oh, go ahead.
For the product that had no drug-specific guidance.
A little louder.
You can certainly submit a protocol so that we can review it beforehand. That would be another option.
Okay. Thank you, Carol. Microphone number 1, please.
Hi, this is for Roseanne. For 356Hs submitted in ANDAs, is it required to include all sites that the API supplier uses for their manufacture when they have a DMF that's available for reference?
All sites should be included for the API manufacturer. The only thing in the there is an instructions form for the 356H, and it clarifies exactly which facilities should be included. There are certain excipients that don't need to be included, facilities for excipients, but API manufacturer should be included.
All their sites that they use.
All right, let's go to our first online question, please.
Okay. This question is for Roseanne or Ankit. Following an ANDA submission, we are currently given an opportunity to remedy ECTD deficiencies prior to the application's acceptance. Will this change after May 5th?
So after May 5th, ECTD guidances become final, and at that point, currently we issue ECTD deficiencies in a separate section, separated from the minor deficiencies within our IRs. But after May 5th, we will include ECTD deficiencies as minor deficiencies within the IR as well. They will be counted as, all ECTD deficiencies will be counted as a single minor deficiency.
Okay, over to microphone number 2, right up close to the microphone, please.
Yeah, this is also for the filing review team. It's related to the question before. As a service provider that publishes ECTDs, we've found that OGD flags certain things as deficiencies that other offices in CDER do not. Is OGD aware of this? And are there any plans to harmonize your approach with the other offices?
We follow the current guidance documents and PDF specifications that are cited on the agency's website to follow the statutory and regulatory requirements that are going to be in place beginning May 5th. From Office of Generic Drugs, in order to ensure that we meet Gdufa dates, those ECTD specifications are in place. So we identify the deficiencies that are listed in the respective agency documents I'm not sure what the other centers or offices do, but that's what the Office of Generic Drugs.
Right. I'll just give some examples. I mean, the ANDA checklist seems to be following the technical conformance guide for a lot of these things, and there are certain things that are common practice that, if you literally interpret the conformance guide, are would be considered deficiencies. For example, literature references. It's a common practice to not add bookmarks to those, and that's been considered acceptable by the FDA, but for OGD, that's considered a deficiency.
That is correct. Through the PDF specifications document, which states that any document longer than 5 pages should have bookmarks.
Okay, so OGD will continue to...
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Microphone number 1.
Question is for the
A little closer to the microphone for me, please.
This question is for the filing review, Roseanne. And you mentioned for the pilot B study. You mentioned for the pilot.
There you go, right
Okay.
close.
You mentioned for the pilot B study. So is this pilot B study packaging is a mandatory? Is the pilot B study packaging is it mandatory for the submission, or is suggested voluntary?
So just to clarify your questions regarding pilot BE study
Yeah.
packaging,
Yeah, the package complete the pilot B study.
only the exhibit batches need to be provided
And for the B study.
for the B.
So if you are conducting a pilot study,
Yeah.
all the summary tables in 2.7 should be provided, and those studies should also be listed in 5.2.
Okay.
As for the specifics of the information that should be provided for the pilot study,
Yeah.
you can direct your question to either Xiaojing or Carol and Michael, because they're the groups that actually review that information. But from a filing perspective,
Yeah.
the summary tables for the
Okay.
pilot studies, and it should also be listed in Module 5 too.
So this is mandatory or suggested by?
No, so if you conduct pilot studies and
Yeah.
you don't provide that information and you
Okay.
indicate in your ANDA submission that you did, it would be an agency that we will provide the clinical summary tables in 2.7 as well as list that study in Module 5.
Okay. So the same question for the module 5, do I have to submit a complete package like a protocol and a report, or just a high level summary?
Would you guys like to answer?
So packaging, you're talking about manufacturer packaging?
No, the complete the B study protocols and the report for the pilot B study, do I have to submit it in the module 5?
I think there is a guidance for a summary submission of all the studies.
Okay.
I think that in that guidance, recommend to submit all the tables, summary tables.
Okay.
I think that if we have questions, we'll ask you more detail about a study report.
Okay.
Yeah, I can share with you the guidance.
Okay, thank you. Offline,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. Online question, please.
This question's for Team Kim and Spagnola. It came in during your presentation. Does FDA have a list of products for which the clinical bioequivalence is mandatory?
So I think the question is, does the FDA have a list of products for which clinical bioequivalent is necessary? And I think the answer is no, but you can always refer to the product-specific guidances for each specific product, and it will clearly outline whether a clinical bioequivalent study or clinical endpoint study is needed. So for whichever specific product you had in mind, the product-specific guidance will specifically and clearly outline if a clinical endpoint study is recommended.
Okay, microphone number 2, please, over there.
Yeah. This question is for Division of Filing Review. In your presentation, you mentioned that if there is a failure in accelerated data, then even then you have to submit the 6 months data. But if my submission, if I'm basing my submission based on long-term data, and if I'm giving 12 months of data, should I need to submit the accelerated data also at the time of submission? If yes, what is the basis for?
At the time of, so the stability Q&A document, as well as the Q&A R2, indicates that both accelerated and long-term stability data should be provided in your ANDA submission. So in that 6 months, 180 days worth of accelerated and long-term stability data and 3 time points for each.
Actually, my question is, if I'm providing 12 months of long-term data at the time of ANDA submission, do I still need to provide the accelerated data,
Yes.
which is failing?
Yes. You should provide 6 months. From a filing perspective, for a filing review, 6 months worth of accelerated and long-term stability data should be provided in your ANDA submission.
Okay, thanks.
My question is for filing review division. So we have newly published guidance, RTR for lack of justification on impurity level. So we actually noticed sometimes there are unspecified impurity limits in monograph higher than the limit, the control limit in ICH. So in those cases, is agency actually suggesting we should specify some routine impurity in the specification and revise the limit for any unspecified impurity? Thank you.
Direct your question to this afternoon's panel with the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality. They would be the ones to best answer that question for you.
Okay, thank you.
This question is for Don. How will a new strength amendment post receipt of tentative approval be dealt with respect to Gdufa goal dates?
So I just want to make sure I have the question right before I answer. How will a new strength amendment issued after a tentative approval affect the goal date? So let me clarify. If you have a tentative approval, then there's no goal date. You have a tentative approval, and in that tentative approval letter is the date you are available for full approval. So depending on when you submit that new strength amendment, it will require some time. So if it's I'm just going to assume it's a non-priority ANDA. It's not a first generic. It's not on a drug shortage list. It's not PEPFAR. It's just a standard ANDA. That new strength amendment will likely take it will likely take a review cycle. Now, when should you submit your new strength amendment? I would submit it before your request for final approval to give as much time as possible for that review.
Okay, microphone number 2, please.
Okay, so my fault for asking too many questions because I didn't get answers to some of them. Okay, so the first one, and then I'll get back in line. What triggers the bio guidances to actually be published?
Yeah. So I guess this is still the office research standard they're posting, but I guess I can just tell you what my view. I think there's several triggers, like my own understanding, like there's sometimes control correspondence for asking for guidances. And also I think they're working at NC-1 or those NDA. They're looking at NDA that's been approved, and then all the exclusivity expired. They predict the time and working on the guidance. And also one thing I'm thinking about is that they probably pre-screening the application that's coming in, and then looking through if there's anything need guidance. That's the things that I'm thinking of. But I guess the best person to answer will be from Office of Research and Standard. And then if you need it, if you need any guidance, probably to me, sending a control correspondence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, over here at microphone number 1. Can the gentleman that hasn't asked a question yet scoot right up and go ahead and ask it, and then you get back in line? No, you already got one. You get to go around back to the end of the line. Yeah, let him. There you go. See, that's the way it's played. There.
Okay, this question is for Ankit, and you mentioned about the CMC deficiency and all the stability tables and everything else. You mentioned that you want the stability start date and the sample pull date. Question is, do you also need the stability testing start date?
So as far as the stability testing date, I would actually defer you to this afternoon's panel with OPQ. At the filing stage, we look at the start date as well as the pull date to assure that 180-day hold time recommendation. But as far as the testing dates, that's probably a better question answered by OPQ folks.
Okay, over to microphone number 1. Please step up right close to the microphone.
What is the typical stability data that the agency looks for when conducting pilot clinical trials?
So can I clarify your question? So I guess my understanding when we start reviewing the bioequivalence, that we're assuming that it's within the expiration time, right? So all these testing and reference, I guess why I'm talking to, I'm thinking about actually we usually like the study be conducted on the fresh test product, but I don't think we have the time requirement for the reference. But hello? But in some cases that the reason, there's sometimes the reason because there's a repeat study or they have to use a batch close to expiration date. I think we're still looking at case by case. So did I answer your question? Is that what you want to ask?
Yes, that is what I wanted to ask. That's a portion of my question, but I wanted to more importantly ask also about the stability data that is required for the samples that go for clinical trial.
The stability to me is more you submit the data to as a chemistry portion, right? So there's a requirement. My understanding, we don't look at those stability data. The OPQ looking at those.
So this question is for reference product choice for BE study. So if RD is discontinued and the reference product, which is generic product, is not available on market, so what should we choose for BE study product?
This is a tough question. So you're saying that the RD discontinued, and also, but isn't in the Orange Book there's a new designated reference standard? There's no?
Yeah, the Orange Book suggests a reference standard which is not available on market.
Okay, in that case, I think that probably you should send a control correspondence just to request either, I feel like the Orange Book maybe need looking into it and designate another reference standard, and also we need to look at, I guess, the guidance, what are the alternative. Yeah.
Okay, so the timeline for correspondence, control correspondence is 2 months, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Microphone number 2, please.
Okay, back to my list of questions. So back to the bioguidances, what causes them to be withdrawn if not by a citizen's petition? I understand that sometimes you have a citizen's petition and then you withdraw until you have answered that citizen's petition. But again, the one particular one we're looking at has been withdrawn for over a year, and I know the CPs have a 180-day limit. So what would cause guidance to be withdrawn?
Hello. So I think there, I don't know if I experienced such cases, but I guess based on my own experience, maybe sometimes it's because when we look at the new data or application, we feel like there's something we need to revise. That's the only situation I feel that maybe the guidance will be pulled out from the website. But I mean, also maybe there's some policy issue or some other scientific consideration. There could be many cases. I don't know if I can answer your specific case.
Okay, next online question, please.
This question is for Roseanne. Does excipients and packaging material testing sites require Form 356H and 3.2p.31? If not, which section of the ANDA should we mention about excipients and packaging testing sites?
I want to defer that question to the OPQ section. They'll be better to answer facility questions later on this afternoon.
Okay. Number one, step up nice and close for me, please.
Hi, the question is for Lily Golson. Can you please clarify time frames for the availability of printed labeling following a safety labeling change?
Could you repeat that?
Oh yes. Could you please clarify time frames for the availability of printed labeling following a safety labeling change?
Could I
Time
verify
frame. One more time.
Time frames for?
Yes, for the availability of the printed labeling, I mean prescribing information on medication guide, following a safety labeling change.
Okay, usually if it's a safety labeling change, usually in the letter they're going to have you respond within, I think it's usually 30 days. They usually give you a time frame to respond to whatever you're going to do and to get your submission in. Is that what you're asking me?
No, I mean, how many times do we have to print the new labeling and to put on the market the product with the new labeling?
How many times do you have to print it?
Yeah.
I think that's a business decision. I'm not sure I'm understanding you. And this is specifically dealing with safety labeling changes, or in general?
No, following a safety labeling changes.
Yeah, well, if it's safety labeling changes, I think the important thing is that you want the correct or the updated labeling in the marketplace.
Okay.
Because obviously there's a problem.
Okay.
So I think you're going to have to decide how many products you have out there, what you're going to have to do in order to ensure that the correct labeling is in the marketplace. So I don't think I can tell you how many times you have to print it. I think it's going to be a business decision.
Okay, thank you very much.
Microphone number two, nice and close for me, please.
Hello. Yeah, the question is for labeling team, Captain Gilson. The same question I'm asking. The moment a label is updated on the Daily Med, how many days do we have as a generic player to update that one?
Okay, labeling's on a Daily Med. I mentioned that, but we should not be looking at labeling on the Daily Med. We should be looking at labeling on drugs at FDA.
Yeah, same. Yeah,
Well, it's not
not
the
the
same.
same. No, no.
It's-
Yeah,
it's not
I agree
quite
with you.
the same
Sometimes
because-
we are receiving emails also from the RPMs saying that the labeling has been updated.
Yes, and that's from drugs at FDA, because we have to understand that not all labeling on Daily Med is approved. So you have to remember that some of the labeling is unapproved labeling that's on the Daily Med, as well as CBE labelings on the Daily Med that has not been reviewed and approved. So that's why we focus on drugs at FDA.
Sure.
So once an update comes in, depending on, there's not a time frame, but if it's something that's safety related, I would want to get it out there as soon as possible. You know, I would not, and a lot of times it's at the time of next printing, but you have to gauge that depending on the change and the urgency in getting it in the marketplace.
Yeah, and one more follow-up question. If we own both the forms for a particular drug product, say like a tablet and a capsule form, after receiving approval, can we combine both the labels for the pack insert?
Okay, so could you repeat that?
If a firm owns both the forms, like a tablet and a capsule for a particular product, can we have a combined label just like RLD.
Okay, so a firm is manufacturing both a tablet and a capsule formulation,
Yes.
and you're wanting to know if they can be combined
Yes.
in the same label.
Yes.
Is it combined in the same label for the RLD?
Yes.
Okay, if it's combined in the label for the RLD, probably after it's approved, you could probably go ahead and combine it. So it kind of depends on how you submitted it, because usually we want it separately in case, things...
Yeah, at the time of initial filing, we have separately filed because ANDAs will be filed at a different time points.
Yeah. Yes, and I think that's helpful, because if you have problems with one application, you can go ahead and get it approved without having to wait until they're both acceptable
Correct.
before they're approved. So prior to approval, they come in separately. I think after they're approved, then you could combine them if the RLD is combined.
Thank you.
All right, online question, please.
This is for Team Kim and Spagnola. Is it acceptable to prove clinical endpoint bioequivalence on one indication and biowaiver requests for another indication with supportive in vitro drug release dissolution similarity with the RLD?
I'm trying to understand the question here. So if there's a clinical endpoint study for one study, but they're trying to ask for a biowaiver for a different trend, is that? Yeah, for a different indication. At this time point, we are asking for a clinical endpoint study for each treatment indication. We cannot waive down or up because they're approved for 2 different indications.
Okay, microphone number 2, please step up nice and close.
The question is for Lily. In case if labeling available for the discontinued RLD is older than the labeling available for the approved generic, and that approved generic is referring to the same RLD, and of course that approved generic labeling is having up-to-date labeling info. So in that case, what is your recommendation to refer which labeling? Can we refer the approved labeling for the comparison?
If it's discontinued, there's
Yes.
an NDA somewhere, NDA RLD, you should submit your labeling based on that.
Okay.
Okay?
We
Even
can
though
compare.
there's something more updated somewhere,
Okay.
you need to be the same as your reference listed drug.
Okay.
Okay, and if
Thank-
something changes, we can address that in the
Yes.
review.
Yes.
Okay?
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Microphone number 1, nice and close for me, please.
Okay, my question has to do with filing review. If you have control correspondence and you've gotten a response from FDA, where does that belong in the submission? The control correspondence.
Your question is, if you submit a control correspondence, you receive a response, where should you place that information?
Yes.
It should either be attached to your cover letter or in Module 1.2 with your cover letter.
Okay, thank you.
Online question, please.
This question is for Ankit. When using 2 lots of an API for each strength, will OGD accept bracketing or matrixing of using 2 lots of an API for a product with multiple strengths?
That's correct. Yes, we will, at the filing stage, we will accept the bracketing or matrixing approach, but it is a matter of technical review, ultimately for approvability.
Microphone number 2, please, nice and close for me.
This question is for Lily. Whenever you have an ANDA that's discontinued and you've requested for withdrawal, and your RLD is also discontinued, whenever there are labeling changes, safety labeling changes, is there a consideration regarding burden to both industry and the division for review to change the thinking and not apply that to those applications?
Yes, we're sensitive to that because it's a lot of work for us as well, because there's a lot of discontinued products in the Orange Book, and we have to reach out to them, every time we get one of those changes. So yes, we're very aware of it, And, we're always seeking ways to streamline things so it won't be as much work on all of us. So, but right now, that's not in place, and so we know that whenever one of these changes come up and you've got 350 drugs you've got to reach out to, we're going through the Orange Book to find all of the follow-ons. So it is under consideration, but right now we don't have that opportunity to deviate. Okay?
And the next gentleman at microphone 2 was up there first, so go ahead and then we'll come over to microphone 1.
My question is to Don Kimball. You have touched base with respect to the requirement of 21 CFR 314.96D, which is a verification statement that needs to be included as a part of an amendment. Can you clarify on what type of amendment this statement is required? And a follow-up question, can this statement be included as a part of patent certification?
So, yes. So I will answer the question, but please note I'm not the subject matter expert. It's probably better for policy. So by default, any amendment you send in should indicate if you do or do not need to recertify. So assume everything that needs a review, whether it be labeling, bio, or OPQ, everything needs to validate that if it needs to be recertified or not. And yes, definitely send them in with patent amendments, but they should be sent in with all of your technical amendments.
Okay, thank you.
Microphone number 1, please.
Hi, my question is for Division of Filing Review. For basis of submission, can we submit the ANDA with only RS information if RLD is not designated in the Orange Book?
Asking if a RLD isn't designated in the Orange Book,
Yes.
if you could use the reference standard as your basis of submission.
Yes.
I'm going to refer you to Mark and Martha's presentation yesterday, as well as the draft guidance for industry on the reference. I can't remember that guidance, but in there it states that if a reference listed drug isn't indicated, you should submit a control correspondence prior to the submission of your ANDA.
Yes, sorry, we did the control correspondence, but if we have to submit right now and control correspondence takes 2 months, so can we submit only with the RS information?
Yeah, I would refer you back to the guidance, and if anything, I would send an email to the SBIA email box, and our OGD policy group can respond to that question appropriately.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take an online question, and then we'll come back to room 2. So, online.
This is for Captain Golson. What are the minimum number of subjects required to perform a BE study with clinical endpoints?
I don't think that's for me.
Who's taking that one?
Like the question is, what is the minimum number of subjects that you will require for submitting an endpoint study? There is no, but is your
A little closer. Nice
there's
and
no
loud.
minimum number,
There you
but
go.
demonstrate bioequivalence.
Okay. Microphone number 2.
This is a question to Roxanne. With respect to the 356H form, when a site has been withdrawn, should such site need to be mentioned in the next subsequent supplement, or can we omit it completely?
If the site has been withdrawn, you can omit it from the next 356H.
And that took us right up to the end of our panel time. Please help me thank our panel for coming and asking our questions. It is 11:30, which is our lunch break. Before I release you on lunch